After focusing on the offense on Monday in free agency, the Jets turned their attention to the defense on Tuesday, making a pair of additions to upgrade the secondary. We're talking DJ Reed, Jordan Whitehead, and more on today's episode of the Locked On Jets podcast.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, this is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Wednesday, March 16th, 2022, and I'm your host, John B. from GanggreenNation.com. Thank you so much for making this show your first listen or your first watch every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. If you like what you see or hear, hit the subscribe button. You'll get new notifications as new episodes are posted, and you'll never miss an episode. And if you're watching on YouTube, please give this episode a thumbs up. It helps other Jets fans find this channel. Well, Monday was all about the offense for the Jets. They got to work as free agency began. They got a new right guard. They got themselves a new tight end. The focus on day two, Tuesday, was all about the defensive side of the ball. The Jets made 3 deals, one of which I think was very good, one of which I think was okay, and one of which I think was horrible. And we're going to talk about those moves ahead on today's episode of the show. And I guess we could begin with the move that I think was very good. The Jets went out and got a corner. And this was a question for me because I was not really sure how Robert Saleh was going to value the corner position. Last year, it was very clear that the Jets invested heavily on the defensive line. It seems very clear that that's where the priority is for Saleh. And the question for me was, is it just a situation where the Jets were focused on the defensive line because that was the first area of the team they wanted to build, and now in year 2 they can focus on other areas? Or is it a broader philosophical thing with Saleh where he just doesn't believe in investing in the secondary, the back end of the defense, the corners? And you have to remember that Robert Saleh's NFL career in the early days, he was coaching with the Seattle Seahawks as an entry-level assistant. And those were the days where the Seahawks were building the Legion of Boom around late-round picks, around guys. They kind of, one guy, Brandon Browner, who came from the CFL, late-round picks. You got Richard Sherman, Byron Maxwell, Jeremy Lane. And was it a case where the Jets just felt that they could coach guys up in the secondary, especially the corner position? So I wasn't really clear on how the Jets were going to do things. Last year, they obviously focused on building this cornerback group around late-round picks. I mean, they had nobody else. It was all young players who were drafted in late rounds, and it seemed like the strategy was just kind of let them go out there, let them make mistakes, let them learn from their mistakes. Heading into year 2, were they going to continue with that approach? And the answer to that was no, because the Jets went out and signed DJ Reed from Seattle. It's a 3-year deal worth $11 million per year, so $33 million overall. And at this point, we don't really have a lot on contract structures, and those are always important. But I like this move a lot. And what's interesting is Robert Saleh, again, comes from Seattle. The Seahawks, through the years, have emphasized size and especially length, especially like long arms out of their cornerback group. So this is not really a guy you'd think of as a prototypical Saleh corner. And Joe Douglas himself, I've talked about this. Joe Douglas typically emphasizes physical tools. And DJ Reed's kind of undersized at 5'9". But what's also interesting is, I talk about Saleh, this Seattle background that has him emphasizing physical tools. Well, DJ Reed comes from Seattle, so he's kind of an exception to the rule for the Seahawks. And at 5'9", that's kind of small for an outside corner, but it's not unprecedented to see an outside corner at 5'9". I think through the years, you had actually a great Jet, Aaron Glenn, member of the Jets all-time team, was 5'9". You think about Antoine Winfield, and listen, that's a very sore subject. If you're a longtime Jets fan, we should not be bringing up Antoine Winfield at the time of free agency, because you go back to 2004 when Terry Bradway had him at the team facility on a free agent visit and struck out, and Antoine Winfield went to Minnesota, was great for years. Very sore subject if you're a longtime Jets fan, but again, 5'9". Terrence Newman, a longtime member of the Dallas Cowboys, played with a couple other teams at 5'10", so it's possible. For me, if you're going to be that sized, if you're going to be 5'9" and be an outside corner, you have to be very physical. And DJ Reed is very physical. I think there's no question about that. Now, the question with DJ Reed beyond his size is, there's a limited sample size. I mean, he has less than 2 full years of starting experience in this league. So that's a question mark, but it's not a deal breaker. And in free agency, you're always signing guys for what they're going to do next year. It's not so much what they're doing this year. The focus is more, what are they going to do going forward? And DJ Reed, he's still relatively young, still very young. That's part of the reason I like this move, is that the Jets yesterday, the 2 big additions that they made, and there was one smaller addition, which was a horrible move, and we'll get to that later, and we can laugh about it because it's not that big of a move. The one bad move the Jets made wasn't that big of a move. But I actually like from this standpoint, I like Tuesday a little bit better than I liked Monday, because the Jets were signing guys in their Jets signed a pair of guys in their mid-20s. And that's the age you want. I always like getting guys on their second contract, not their third contract, or not their second contract after they've been franchised 2 years. So he's young, he's physical, he's going to bring a new element to this secondary. I think he's really solid fit. Maybe not necessarily the physical tools you're looking for, but a guy who I think should be the number 1 corner on this defense. And the other aspect of this I like is that if you're going to go kind of small at one corner position, then I think you definitely do want a guy who's bigger with more length at the other cornerback position. Bryce Hall is big. So from that standpoint, I think they complement each other. And if you're going to go with like a kind of an undersized guy, a 5'9" guy at one outside corner, your other guy really can't be small. There's a few years back, I was listening to a podcast. I wish I remember who was on it. I wish I remember the podcast, but the point was made that you can have guys who are kind of outliers at a certain position, but your whole team can't be outliers. So the example that was used was, if you draft like a 235-pound defensive end, he might be a good player. But if you have an entire defensive line of guys who are 235 pounds, you're going to get destroyed. So you can only have like one exception or so. And I think DJ Reed, he's one exception, and you have Bryce Hall at the other corner spot. And beyond that, I think this kind of improves the depth, because I mentioned this last week when I profiled the Jets secondary. To me, Brandon Echols is not starting material. And I know people are high on him. I don't equate Brandon Echols to Bless Austin, because physically they're different. I think their games are a little different. But I equate Brandon Echols to Bless Austin from the standpoint that I think both are a little bit overrated within the Jets fan base. And a lot of that's just based on the fact that they got a lot of playing time very early in their careers. And I think sometimes what happens with these guys is, if they play a lot early on in their careers, you get the idea that they're better than they really are, because you think, well, they're getting experience. Well, just having experience, just being on the field itself, is not necessarily that big of a deal. It's, what's your skill set? What are you developing into? Now, obviously, for some players, you struggle early as you learn some of the technical aspects of your craft. As you learn some of the nuances of your position, some of the techniques. And you get better at that through the years. But on some level, there is a question, do you have much of a ceiling? And I'm not sure Brandon Echols really has much of a ceiling, but I can totally buy Brandon Echols as maybe like a backup corner kind of guy. Somebody who comes off the bench, somebody who maybe can't hold up for an entire 17-game season, but somebody who can play pretty solid for you over a shorter stretch. Somebody who can maybe give you 2 to 3 games in the middle of the season if one of your starting corners suffers maybe like an ankle injury that knocks him out 2 to 3 weeks. So I think in a way, the Jets kind of improved their depth as well. You could kind of argue it's one of those moves that improves the Jets in multiple areas just in one signing, because I think it improves your number 1 corner spot, because DJ Reed's probably better than anybody the Jets have, so Bryce Hall's not your number 1 corner, and I like Bryce Hall. I don't know that Bryce Hall's the kind of guy you want matching up with the elite receivers of the league. DJ Reed listen, this is not, I don't want to make DJ Reed out to be Darrelle Revis in his prime, but he's a clear upgrade, guy who I think fits pretty well, a guy who plays in a similar system in Seattle. And that's another thing. In free agency, you always have to worry about the scheme fit. And that's one of the reasons I think you see free agency can be very, very hit or miss, especially as you get to the bigger money deals. Because what happens in free agency is you sign a guy, but you have to project him into a new scheme. And in the NFL, teams are so scheme dependent. Teams run wildly different schemes. And we can talk about, this guy's a corner, this guy's a corner. What you ask your corners to do can vary wildly from team to team. And that's true at any position. It's true on the defensive line. I mean, defensive tackles can have wildly different roles across different schemes. Linebackers can have wildly different roles within different schemes. So when you import a guy, you're kind of like trying to project him to your scheme. And one of the things that's good here is that Seattle runs a pretty similar scheme to the Jets because Robert Saleh was based, Robert Saleh early in his career was influenced by what Seattle did. So you're bringing in a guy who has had success in a system similar to yours. So I like this signing. I think that this is up there with Tomlinson. The DJ Reed and Laken Tomlinson, I think, are the two really, really solid signings the Jets have made. I think the Jets have turned two areas of weakness heading into the free agency into areas you could argue are now strengths. As I said, this is the type of thing that improves multiple positions. DJ Reed's a better number one corner than the Jets had. Bryce Hall's a better number two. He's bumped to the number two corner. He's a better number two corner than the Jets had. And Brandon Echols is probably a better backup. He's now I guess the number four corner because your slot corner is typically number three. Your first corner off the bench is now better. So you've improved multiple different positions in one move. So I really think this was a really solid move for the Jets. And I think the corner group is a lot better today than it was yesterday. But the Jets did not end there as they upgraded their secondary. There was also the signing of a safety, Jordan Whitehead from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm going to talk about how he fits into this defense. I don't love the player as much as a lot of Jets fans do, but I like this signing a lot more than a lot of Jets fans do. And I will explain what I mean by that ahead on this Tuesday episode, or this Wednesday episode of Locked On Jets. We can debate the best signing the Jets have made the same way you could debate the best Built Bar out there. There are so many delicious Built Bar flavors. You got mint brownie, you got coconut almond, and new this month is white chocolate cookies and cream. These bars are all delicious and new flavors are coming out all the time. In fact, I'm not sure if you've tried Puffs, but if you haven't, you're missing out on one of the best tasting Built Bars ever. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar, they are a treat, and they are covered in 100% real chocolate. Puffs are a fan favorite with some incredible flavors: yummy cinnamony, churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. So good, they're going to be your favorite. And all bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. So go to Built.com and scroll down the chart. You'll be blown away. High protein, low calories. Most bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which usually has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. Again, it's Built.com, Built.com. You can check out all the delicious Built Bar flavors and decide which one is the best for you. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Wednesday. We're talking about the second day of free agency, or I guess it's the legal tampering period. Free agency in the NFL. This is very weird. Free agency in the NFL doesn't officially begin until 4 o'clock Eastern today, but teams are allowed to begin negotiating early with free agents to be. They're not technically allowed to make deals, although I think you've seen over the last 2 days how strictly that rule is adhered to. I mean, we're at the official beginning of free agency, and a lot of the good players are already off the board. Now, yesterday, the Jets were making a run at Marcus Williams, a guy I really wanted, free agent from the Saints, and Marcus Williams did not want to come to the Jets. I mean, I think it's that simple. So the Jets had to move on to Plan B. And their Plan B was Jordan Whitehead, who's played with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Again, another guy in his mid-20s, another guy second contract. And this is a funny deal because a lot of Jets fans are very excited about the player. I'm not as excited about the player, but I'm excited about the signing. I think Jordan Whitehead's a decent player. I'm not saying he's a bad player, but I'm more excited about the signing than I am about the player. He's a very good guy against the run. In his career, he's been kind of up and down as a coverage guy. But here's why I'm excited about the signing more than the player. It means that I don't have to watch Ashton Davis take a horrible angle and turn a 7-yard run into a 40-yard run. This knocks Ashton Davis out of the projected starting lineup because you also brought back LaMarcus Joyner. So on that front alone, I think this is a phenomenal signing for the Jets. I don't think Jordan Whitehead's a bad player. The Jets get him on 2 years, around $14.5 million. This is kind of like one of your classic free agent moves where you're taking an area that was a complete black hole, an area where you just had absolutely nothing, and you're plugging in a credible NFL player. Now, I think there are some questions with Jordan Whitehead. One of them is, how's he going to handle coverage? Because, the NFL is kind of shifting to a league where you're seeing more too deep safety looks. And I look at Jordan Whitehead and I see a guy who's really, if you look at his success in his career, a lot of it's come playing closer to the line of scrimmage, either as a box defender, maybe lining up in the slot a little outside the where the offensive line is deployed. I mean, this is a guy who plays a lot close to the line, and the NFL's kind of shifting away from that. The NFL's kind of shifting to more too deep looks because teams are figuring out on defense that it's more important to stop the pass than it is the run in today's NFL. And Whitehead's he's an excellent run defender. And listen, I don't want to make it sound like, and I'm going to be very measured in what I say here. I don't, because run defense it's much more important to have quality play on your defensive line and linebacker group than it is your secondary. But when your run defense is as bad as the Jets was last year, every little bit helps. And the Jets got two guys in the secondary who are at least good players against the run. I mentioned DJ Reed, very physical. He likes to tackle. He's going to be good in run support. And in this scheme, again, it's not more important. Please don't email me telling me like I'm acting like this turns the Jets' run defense great. I'm not. But you do need your corners to help in run support. And that was a problem with the Jets last year. Some big runs were because their corners were bad in run support. So they got a guy in DJ Reed who likes to tackle, who's going to help in that area, who's going to at least assist them on the outside runs. And Jordan Whitehead's a good run-stopping safety. And again, it's going to be interesting because I think they'll deploy him a little bit further back than he's been used to in his career. But he's going to help against the run. And again, every little bit helps. And listen, a lot of the big runs that happened last year happened because the Jets safeties took bad angles or missed tackles. Some of those big runs, you can't blame the safeties for the first 7 yards, but you can blame them for the last 33 on a 40-yard run. And there were too many times we were blaming the safeties, especially Ashton Davis, for the last 33. So from that standpoint, he's going to help a lot. So am I as high on the player as a lot of people? I'm not low on the player. I'm probably not as high on the player as you are, but I'm probably higher on the signing than you are just because I'm so tired of watching Jet safeties blow run assignments and allow big runs. So that alone, I mean, even if this guy's just okay, this probably makes the signing worth it. And it's not a bad deal. It's 2 years, $14.5 million. So, I think very tough to complain about that deal. Kind of just a move that improves the defense. Not a guy who's going to be a star player, not a guy who's going to change the defense, but you got to have those guys, when you're talking, at the top end of your defense, you want like a really, impact guy, maybe your first to third or first to fourth best players. You're hoping you have a bunch of impact guys there. But 5 through 11, you want to have solid guys there. He's more of like a 5th through 11th best player on a good defense. And Jets did not have solid play at the safety. Safety play was really, and part of it was injuries, but I think this clearly is going to help the Jets this coming season. And there was also one other move. It was a depth move, and it was a horrible move. And we can laugh about it. See, the good thing is, like, when you make a horrible move as one of your big free agent moves, we get upset about it. We get disappointed. When your horrible move is just a depth move, we can kind of laugh about it. And that's the Jets decided to bring Nathan Shepard back. What's my analysis on why they did this? I have no idea what the Jets are thinking. Why would you bring this guy back? That makes no sense to me. It really makes no sense to me why they'd bring Nathan Shepard led the team in penalties last year. He had 7 penalties. He did not even play half the snaps. What are we doing here? I don't even want to hear this. Please do not tell me this was a signing that makes sense. Don't use the word depth. Depth means that I have decent players who are coming off the bench for me. Bad players coming off the bench for me is not depth. Nathan Shepard, I'll say this, he has like some redeeming quality. He's actually not an awful pass rusher. Please don't defend the move with that, though. Nathan Shepard should not have come back. Yes, depth. Depth is not just signing somebody. You could sign, like the Jets would, by the logic people are using to defend this signing by calling it depth, any signing, the Jets would automatically have depth because it's not like they're going to go into the season with just like 3 defensive tackles. Bad move. At least it's a depth. At least it's like not a move that's going to have a big impact because again, Nathan Shepard didn't play that many snaps last year. The 2 other signings were much more consequential. The 2 other signings were much better moves. So we don't need to we can laugh. But bad job, Jets. Bad job. Good job on Reed. Good job on Whitehead. Horrible job on Shepard, Jets. That's my free agent assessment for Tuesday. But it wasn't just about the players the Jets added. They also lost a couple of guys who were in starting roles for them last year. They lost a longtime member of the team, and they lost a guy we were kind of expecting them to lose. And we'll talk about those guys ahead on this Wednesday episode of the Locked On Jets podcast. This is the Locked On Jets podcast on this Wednesday. We're talking about the second day of the NFL's legal tampering period. We've discussed the players the Jets have added. The Jets did lose a couple of players, however, on Tuesday. Both of them are no surprise. One is Morgan Moses, who it was always a long shot the Jets were going to be able to keep him. He signs with Baltimore on a 3-year deal worth $15 million. Thank you for your year with the Jets, Morgan Moses. I mean, he actually ended up, to the extent a 4-13 can be saved by a player, Morgan Moses really saved the Jets this year. Jets got him late in the offseason last year. It was one of those situations where he was cut so late. He really did not have any options because there were so few teams that had cap space available. But the Jets happened to have cap space available, so they were able to get him on a 1-year deal to provide them with depth, which ended up being really important because Mekhi Becton, the left tackle, suffered what turned into a season-ending injury in the opener against the Carolina Panthers. So Moses stepped in, and as much as anything, at the tackle position, the Jets needed durability. And he didn't miss a game. He started the final 16 games, gave them very solid play. I think, listen, not Pro Bowl level play, not all pro level play, but relative to the cost, very effective performance by Morgan Moses last season. It would have been great to keep him as the third tackle, but there were always going to be better opportunities available on better teams. It would just seem like the fact that Jets even got him last year was kind of an outlier. I mean, you wouldn't have expected a player like Morgan Moses to sign with a team for as cheap as he signed with the Jets last year. There would have been much more competition had he been released earlier by Washington. So you can't get upset over it. You had to expect that he was leaving. You would have loved to have kept him, especially at that price, but there were just always going to be better opportunities available for Morgan Moses. And the same could probably be said for Marcus May, who leaves the Jets. He signs with the Saints for a 3-year deal. The deal is worth around $28.5 million. And you know what the irony of this is? Like, if May was willing to take that money last year, he'd probably still be a Jet. But last year, there were obviously contract issues between May and the Jets. And to be honest with you, I kind of took the Jets side at the time because Marcus May's a good player. He's not a great player. It kind of sounds like Marcus May wanted great player money. And that's the kind of thing that really comes back to get you in the NFL if you give good players great player money. So I couldn't really blame the Jets. He came back on the franchise tag, and it just kind of seemed like that ship had sailed. It seemed like there was lots of bad blood between May and the team. May was upset because the Jets wouldn't pay him. And listen, I'm actually happy for Marcus May. I was not sure he was going to get paid this offseason. I was a little concerned because he was coming off the Achilles injury last year. 2021 was just a nightmare year for Marcus May. He suffered that Achilles injury, and that's the type of thing that can really impact your value. It can the type of thing that can impact your career. And Marcus May went out and was a great player for the Jets for a number of years. A great second-round pick in 2017. Had kind of a lost year in 2018, but aside from that, was really good up to 2021, which was a year where he was kind of underperforming. It was clear he wasn't happy because he did not get the deal he wanted. Then suffered that Achilles injury in the Thursday night game against Indianapolis. Guy you could just stick at the free safety position, the back of your defense, and not have to worry about things. So, kind of sad to see him go. Kind of sad they couldn't work things out, but it seemed like the ship had. I mean, who would have thought that of these a year ago, if I told you of these two players, Nathan Shepard, Marcus May, Nathan Shepard would be the one getting the second contract for the Jets. Would you have believed me? Again, 2 days ago, if I told you Nathan Shepard was getting... I'm still working on Nathan Shepard, bringing him back. Why Jets? But Marcus May leaves the Jets. He goes to the Saints. This is a guy who hasn't won in his career and has been really good for the Jets. So, we'll see. Hopefully, for his sake, he has some better team success, and hopefully he continues to play as well as he has. Jets obviously going in a different direction, going younger at the safety position with Jordan Whitehead, and Marcus May leaves the Jets on a 3-year deal to go to New Orleans. Well, that's all for today's show. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, if you enjoy what you see or hear, hit the subscribe button. You'll never miss an episode. If you're watching on YouTube, please thumbs up for this episode. It helps the channel out, and it helps other Jets fans find Locked On Jets. I hope you have a great Wednesday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll talk more Jets.